I found out my marriage was over from a photo my sister sent to the wrong chat. That's the whole story in one sentence. Everything else is just what I did in the 10 days after. I was standing at my kitchen island with flour still on my hands. I'd been making bread, of all things, the most patient thing a person can do with an afternoon, when my phone buzzed twice. My sister's name lit up the screen. A picture, sent by mistake, meant for someone else. I opened it before I could think better of it. My husband, sitting in a hospital bed holding 2 newborns. The caption underneath, "Look who's finally a dad." I didn't drop the phone. I didn't cry out. I just went very quiet in a way I didn't recognize in myself. The way a house goes quiet right before a storm hits, not peaceful, just paused. My name is Renata Voss. I'm 34. I spend my days as a fraud investigator for an insurance firm, which means I get paid to notice the one number in a spreadsheet that doesn't belong, the one date that doesn't line up, the one story that's almost airtight except for a single loose thread. I've built an entire career on the idea that people who think they'll never get caught stop being careful. I never imagined I'd need that skill in my own home. Dominic and I got married when I was 26. He ran a small architecture firm with 2 partners, the kind of man who could walk into a room and rearrange its energy without trying. We talked about kids the way people talk about the weather changing, not if, just when. It took 4 years before we admitted we needed help. Then came the clinics, the injections, the vocabulary that starts to feel like a second language you never asked to learn. We lost 2 pregnancies before either one became more than a flutter on an ultrasound screen. Each time, I did what I always do. I went looking for the cause. My stress, my job, the single glass of wine I'd had before I knew. I blamed my body for 10 years because the truth wasn't available to me yet. Through all of it, Dominic held my hand in waiting rooms and said the same 4 words like a spell he needed to keep casting. "We'll figure it out." I believed him without evidence, the way you believe in gravity. My sister Priya, 2 years younger, always the first to show up with soup or a hug or a call me anytime, used to tell me she didn't know how I held myself together. I never once considered that admiration and envy can wear the same expression. The foe. The day the picture came through had been unremarkable in every way that matters. A slow Wednesday, low autumn light through the window, bread rising on the counter. I called Priya back within a minute of seeing it. She picked up already crying. "Renata, I didn't want you to find out this way." I hung up before she finished the sentence. I didn't need to hear the rest. 10 years of finding inconsistencies for a living had taught me exactly one rule. Once you spot the first crack, you don't confront anyone. You map the whole structure first. You confirm the entire shape of the lie before you let a single person know you've seen it. So I opened my laptop instead. I found the highest-rated family law attorney in the city, a woman named Ajora Bell, and booked the first available slot. 2 days later, I sat in her office, and I signed the paperwork to end a 10-year marriage. My hand didn't shake. I remember being almost disappointed by how steady I was. I didn't tell Dominic. I didn't tell Priya I knew. I went home and finished baking the bread. People who are sure they'll never get caught leave the messiest trails because they've stopped bothering to be careful. Dominic had spent a decade curating the story of a devoted husband weathering infertility beside me, maintaining one story that well means you rarely notice you're leaving fingerprints on another. I started with the joint account we kept for household bills. Buried between grocery runs and the electric company, I found 6 charges to the same boutique hotel 2 towns over, always Tuesday into Wednesday. I lined the dates up against my own calendar, location history I'd forgotten I even had turned on. 4 of those hotel stays landed exactly on weeks I was recovering from procedures. Weeks he'd told me he was staying late at the office to clear his head. I sat at that same kitchen island until 3 a.m., and piece by piece, the last 4 years of my marriage rearranged themselves into something I no longer recognized. Priya had always said she was just the one driving Dominic to appointments when I couldn't. "I'm only helping," she'd say, like it cost her nothing. I found records showing half those appointments didn't exist on any clinic calendar. Then I found the shared photo account neither of us had ever deactivated. Almost 4 years of images. Priya standing too close at a firm holiday party. A business trip with a beach in the background nowhere near a client site. They hadn't been careful. They'd simply never imagined I would look. There's a specific kind of pain in confirming a betrayal you already half suspected, and it's different from discovering one you never saw coming. This was the second kind. Underneath it, something colder was forming, clarity. For 10 years, I had carried every hard moment of that marriage as my own failure. Now I understood I'd been carrying someone else's choices the entire time. I didn't confront Dominic. I built a file instead, every receipt, every mismatched alibi, every time-stamped photo that told a truer story than either of them ever told me out loud, organized the way I'd organize evidence for a claim. No commentary needed. The facts spoke for themselves. I handed the file to Adjora Bell. She read it in front of me, expression unreadable in the practiced way of someone who's seen every shape heartbreak can take. "This is thorough," she finally said. 10 years of practice, I told her. She didn't ask what I meant. 4 days after that meeting, my phone rang with a number I hadn't expected, Yolanda, Dominic's mother. We'd always had a warm, easy relationship. This call felt different from the first ring. "Renata," she said, and then nothing, just breathing. When she found her voice again, it was cracking. "Please, don't tell him yet." I stood very still in the same kitchen where I'd seen that photo, and felt the ground shift again under something I thought I already understood completely. "Don't tell him what, Yolanda?" She wouldn't answer the question directly. She just repeated those 4 words like they were the only thing holding her upright. I met her 2 days later at a coffee shop we'd been to a dozen times. She looked like she hadn't slept in a week, Yolanda, who ironed her napkins and never raised her voice. "What I'm about to tell you," she said before I'd even sat down, "I should have said 9 years ago. I've regretted the silence every day since." I let the quiet stretch. It's the fastest way to get someone talking. She told me in pieces, the way people do when saying something plainly makes it permanently real. "Does Priya know?" I asked, because that was the question sitting heaviest on my chest. "No," Yolanda said firmly. "Neither does Dominic, only me and one other person. Dr. Ann Kessler, your old doctor." My stomach dropped. Dr. Kessler had overseen nearly every stage of our fertility treatment 9 years earlier. "There was a report," Yolanda said, hands shaking around her cup. "Results from testing back when you two were still trying everything. It came to the house by mistake, addressed to Dominic. I opened it without thinking the way you do with mail that looks routine." Her voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't routine. She'd called Dr. Kessler herself and asked, mother to physician, to let her handle it in her own time. The doctor agreed, against her better judgment, because she'd known the family for years. "I never did right by anyone," Yolanda said. "I just delayed the pain until it grew into something enormous." She wouldn't tell me the contents there, in pieces, in a coffee shop. "You deserve to see it properly," she said. "The way I should have shown Dominic 9 years ago instead of hiding it in a drawer." Before I left, she said one more thing that replayed in my head the whole drive home. "Those bobbies changed everything, Renata, just not for the reason Dominic thinks." I called Dr. Kessler's office before I'd finished my coffee the next morning. I hadn't spoken to her in 5 years, since Dominic and I quietly agreed to stop treatment and grieve the family we weren't going to have. "I need my old file," I told her. "Everything." "Come in this afternoon," she said. "I'll pull it myself." Her office looked exactly as I remembered, same soft gray walls, same watercolor prints meant to soften devastating news. She had a folder already waiting. "Before I show you this," she said, "I need you to know I've regretted my part in it for years. Yolanda came to me in real distress, and I made a choice I wouldn't make again. I let a mother's fear override a patient's right to her own results." Inside were pages I recognized, hormone panels, ultrasound notes. But near the back, a report I'd never seen, dated 9 years earlier, addressed specifically to Dominic. Never to me. The difficulty we'd faced for nearly a decade hadn't originated with my body at all. There was a significant male factor finding. One Dr. Kessler had recommended discussing together, as a couple, in writing. That letter had gone home in an envelope meant for Dominic. His mother opened it by mistake and, in a moment of panic, decided to protect him from a truth she thought he couldn't survive. 10 years of self-blame rearranged itself into something entirely different, right there in that office. Every sleepless night doing mental math on what I might have done wrong. Every apology I'd whispered in the dark. None of it had ever belonged to me. Why didn't she ever tell him? I asked, though I already understood the shape of the answer. Fear, Dr. Kessler said gently. She loved her son fiercely, in the way some mothers do, where protecting him mattered more than the truth. I don't think she considered what it would eventually cost you both. I thought about Priya, and about a photo of Dominic holding 2 newborns, a caption calling him a father without hesitation. If this report was accurate, those children weren't biologically his. Which meant Priya either didn't know the truth herself or knew something far more complicated than an affair. I asked for copies of everything. Dr. Kessler made them without hesitation, like she was finally, after 9 years, allowed to do her job the way she should have from the start. I didn't hear from Dominic for almost 2 weeks after I filed the paperwork. He was staying wherever Priya was, playing house with 2 infants that carried a truth none of them understood yet. It was Yolanda who called on a Thursday evening, voice tight with dread. He's coming home tonight. He wants me to meet the Bobbies properly. A pause. He's bringing Priya. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, I told her. I've hidden this for 9 years, she said quietly. I think it's time I stopped. She told me everything afterward, in enough detail that I could picture it like I'd been standing in the doorway myself. Dominic arrived first, easy and confident as always. Priya followed with a baby carrier in each hand, her face arranged somewhere between apology and pride. Yolanda said she looked exhausted the way new mothers do, but lit from underneath by something she believed she'd finally earned. Mom, Dominic said, gesturing at the twins Priya was lifting free of their carriers. You're finally a grandmother. The room went silent, Yolanda told me. She looked at those 2 small faces, and something in her simply gave out 9 years of sleepless nights, of convincing herself silence was protection, collapsing the instant she saw those bobbies in her son's arms. Mom, what's wrong? Dominic asked, his smile faltering. The words that came out of her weren't the ones she'd rehearsed for 9 years. They came out smaller, more broken, but true. You don't know, she whispered. She never told you. Dominic went still. Priya, one baby still in her arms, went pale in a way that told Yolanda immediately. Whatever was coming, it was news to both of them, for different reasons. Tell me what? Dominic asked, voice already sensing the ground shift. Yolanda walked to the study without another word and knelt in front of a small fireproof safe she'd kept for exactly this moment. The one she'd told herself for 9 years she'd open when she was ready. Inside was a single sealed envelope, soft at the edges from nearly a decade of being touched, and returned to its hiding place. She carried it back to the living room and set it on the coffee table. What is this? Dominic asked. Sit down, Yolanda said, please. She laid the contents out 1 page at a time. The original lab results, the letter from Dr. Kessler addressed to Dominic, and a handwritten note she'd added the same week she'd intercepted the mail 9 years earlier. Dominic read slowly, then faster, then slower again. This is about me, he said finally, looking up. Yes, Yolanda said. This isn't Renata's file, it's mine. You're telling me the reason we couldn't have kids was never her. His voice had gone flat. 9 years, he said. 9 years I let her think it was her fault. She apologized to me. She used to cry and apologize, and I let her because I never knew there was anything to say otherwise. Priya had gone very still across the room, the baby quiet against her shoulder. If the diagnosis was real and had never resolved, the same condition that made conception nearly impossible with me would have made it just as unlikely with her. Charles, Priya started, catching herself. She meant Dominic. What does this mean? He didn't answer her. He was still looking at his mother. You knew, he said. You've known for 9 years and you let me believe. He couldn't finish it. He stood and started packing. I was trying to protect you, Yolanda said, breaking. Protect me from what? The truth. A piece of paper. You let me watch my wife blame herself for 9 years. You let me watch her go through losses thinking it was her body when the whole time. Priya rose slowly, shifting the baby onto her hip. Dominic, I need you to look at this with me. If this is true, then these bobbies. She couldn't finish either. Whatever they'd built together over 4 years had been built on the exact same broken foundation as the marriage he'd just ended. The affair, the secrecy, the children he'd been so proud to introduce as his own minutes earlier, none of it meant what he thought it meant. I need to see Renata, he said finally, hollow. He grabbed his keys and was gone before anyone could stop him. Dominic showed up at my house a little after 9 that night. I watched his headlights sweep across the living room wall and knew, with a strange kind of calm, exactly what the visit was about. He looked undone in a way I'd never seen, collar askew, eyes red-rimmed. Still holding the report, creased now from being gripped too hard. You knew, he said before I'd fully opened the door. Renata about the report. I found out 10 days ago, I said. The same way I found out about Priya, by accident. He flinched at her name. I swear to you, I had no idea about any of this. I know, I said, and I meant it. Standing there, looking at the wreckage of a man who just learned that 9 years of guilt he'd let me carry alone had never belonged to me, I felt something closer to sorrow than anger. Not enough to change anything I'd already decided, just enough to remember he, too, had been living inside a lie someone else constructed, even while building plenty of his own on top of it. I let him in, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted this conversation on my terms, in my space, ending exactly when I chose. He told me everything. His mother, the safe, the way Priya had gone pale, realizing the twins likely weren't his either. I'm not asking you to forgive Priya, he said. I'm not even asking you to forgive the affair. But if my mother had told me the truth 9 years ago, none of this happens. You have to see this started with a lie that wasn't mine. I let him finish. People reveal more when you let them talk all the way to the end. You're right, I said finally. The lie wasn't yours. Your mother made a choice she shouldn't have, and she'll carry that for the rest of her life. I think she already understands that better than either of us could tell her. I paused. But you're wrong about one thing. This didn't start with your mother's secret. It started the day you decided that whatever you were missing at home, you were entitled to go find somewhere else with my sister, without ever once telling me you were struggling. I didn't know how to say it, he said quietly. So you let me carry more, I said. You let me believe I was the reason we couldn't have a family for 9 years, while you built one with someone else. The report explains part of the pain. It doesn't erase the choice you made in response to it. He didn't have an answer for that. What happens now? He asked, smaller than I'd ever heard him. Now the divorce moves forward. Nothing about tonight changes that. He nodded slowly. And Priya? That's not my concern anymore. And saying it, I found it was true. Somewhere between the hotel receipts and Yolanda's confession and a quiet clinical report, I had stopped needing to know what happened to my sister. The final mediation happened 3 weeks later on a Thursday morning. I dressed the way I'd dress for any important meeting, simple, composed. I wasn't performing steadiness anymore. By then, I simply had it. Dominic looked smaller than the man I'd married, though that had less to do with the room and more to do with the 3 weeks he'd just lived through. I'd heard, secondhand, that Priya had already moved out of state with the twins, unwilling to stay somewhere that only reminded her of a foundation that had never been what she believed. Before the proceedings began, Dominic tried one last time. I know I don't deserve to ask, but is there any version where we try again? I looked at him for a long moment and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not sadness, just a quiet finality, the way you feel finishing the last page of a book whose ending you already knew. There isn't, I said. Not because I can't forgive you, Dominic. I think in time I probably will, but forgiveness was never going to be the same thing as staying. He nodded. Something in his shoulders let go, like part of him had been waiting to hear exactly that. When it was over, I stood outside the courthouse in the late morning light and felt, for the first time in a decade, entirely unaccountable to anyone else's version of my life. Yolanda called that evening. She didn't ask for forgiveness outright. She understood forgiveness isn't something requested and granted on the same day. She said she was proud of how I'd handled everything, and that she hoped someday we might know each other without her son standing between us. I told her I'd like that. I meant it. I never saw Dominic again after that day, aside from one brief exchange over paperwork months later. I heard he sold his stake in the firm and moved to another city, trying to build a life far enough from the one that had come apart in front of everyone he loved. As for me, I didn't rebuild my life around what I'd lost. I built it around what I'd learned. A year after the divorce, I used part of the settlement to start a small nonprofit that helps couples navigate infertility with full, transparent access to their own medical information. One that doesn't leave anyone quietly carrying blame that was never theirs. I named it after no one in particular. It didn't need my story attached to matter. It just needed to exist. I think about those 10 years now, not with bitterness, but with a strange kind of gratitude for the woman they eventually made me. I spent so long believing I'd failed at the one thing I wanted most. I know now I never failed at anything. I simply trusted people who weren't honest enough to deserve it. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's refusing to carry their lies for one more day.